Hey, and welcome to a new video. When you start playing guitar, you don't need more than a guitar and an amp. But one day you buy your first pedal and you fell in love with. Then you get yourself another one and another one and another one. All of a sudden you end up with half a dozen pedals laying on the floor, cables crossing all over the place, and a guitarist continuously stumbling over it. Yeah, that happens a lot to me. So, decision made, I need a pedalboard. Usually I design projects like this in my mind. For you, I did this 3D model so you can refer to what I'm talking about. We have two angled side pieces, a front and a back, which are close to identical, a base and a shelf. A few years ago, my parents' neighbor let us cut his European cherry tree down. I cut a few boards out of it. Now they are dry enough. I used a draw knife to get the bark off, which was pretty tough at this stage. I should have done that right after cutting the tree down. Underneath there were these tunnels made by insects. I don't know what you would call that in English. The pattern they left was so unique that I decided to make them visible, and in the end they were some kind of the seam of the sides. So I planed one edge straight that I can reference off. It took me a while to clean the tunnels with a wire brush. Then I tried to plane the rest of the bark away with a spoke shave, which didn't work out that well, so I switched to a card scraper to scrape it away. I decided how tall the sides and how steep the angle should be, draw a line and cut it with my Japanese handsaw. Although the cherry is very dense, it cut pretty good. It just took me a little bit more power. I removed all of the saw marks by planing. My shooting board was to plane the end grain ends square. The piece of wood that I wanted to use as a front panel was a little bit too short. I couldn't cut off the 45-degree notch that was cut in there when the tree was taken down. That's why I decided to incorporate this into my design, which basically means that I also cut an angle on the other end of the board. I wasn't sure how I wanted to join the side panels to the front and back. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to do a mitered joint in the front. I wanted the front to be as clean as possible, cause I will always see it. A half-blind miter is a little bit difficult to cut, and even more difficult with another 45-degree miter crossing it. But it worked. When I was ready for glue up, I realized how much the pieces warped. It needed a few wedges to compensate that. On the inside of the frame I put a square that helps keeping everything aligned. Then I used two longer clamps to put pressure on the joint itself. After the glue had dried, I drilled a hole through the joint and put a wooden dowel in that will help it from coming loose over time. There was a small gap between the front and the side piece. I planed a chamfer on, first using a chisel and later using a block plane. Off camera, I glued a piece of oak on top of it. The back panel had cracked in a couple of places. I decided to stabilize it by using two butterfly inlays. You can see I shaped both at once and later cut them in half. Then I pre-drilled and cut the mortise with a chisel to size. I cut the groove for the bass with my router and an edge guide. Talking of the bass, I made it out of 3mm poplar plywood, same I used for the shelf. Both I cut to size with the saw and refined the edges with a plane. Plywood has the tendency to warp over time, and 8mm plywood still has a lot of flex to it. I glued a piece of oak to the underside after drilling 2 holes in its ends. With a wooden dowel, that will be the hinge to open the shelf and reach the underneath storage. Most of my guitar tone comes from the drive unit of my amps. My signal path will be like guitar into drive pedals, into amp, back to the delay pedals, to the reverb pedals, and back to the amp. Everything in true stereo. Means that I need 4 outputs and 2 inputs. More about my signal path in a second video. For now, you just have to know that I need a panel with 6 TS jacks and 1 for power. I cut those out of mahogany. I typically do not use tropical wood, but these were old window frames before, so I think that's okay. The TS jack sockets from Neutrik that I used just can handle a panel with a thickness up to 6mm. So I recessed the panel. I pre-drilled everything, then used my router and a coping ring to route a small rabbet that the panel can rest on. In the plywood of the shelf, I drilled holes, many holes, in 2 different sizes. Later, the cables were run through there. used a small round over bit to round it all over, which took quite a while. After sanding, it was time for the finish. My plan was to use tung oil and put a coat of shellac on top. But there was a chemical reaction and there were great spots everywhere. I scraped it all back to clean wood and used tung oil. The shelf and the base I stained black, before doing a French polish with black shellac on top. I decided to leave the pores of the wood open. You can use pumice powder during the first coats of shellac to fill the pores. I wanted it to be not that shiny in the end. My first coats I put on with a brush. Later I switched to a cotton rag. Make sure to work fast and just put a minimal amount of shellac on per coat. It took me about 3 weeks. 9 coats of shellac each day to get the finish I want. On to the electric. I used high quality instrument cables. I cut off the outer tube and then cut the mantle of the copper wire in half. That will be the ground. In the inner tube there's the wire for the signal. Signal always gets soldered to the tip, the ground to the sleeve. Soldering and filming is very difficult. Sorry for my hands in the way. I drilled through the panel to run wires through. A hinge for drilling big holes in thin timber. Drill slow. If it will tend to split, drill with the drill bit turning counterclockwise. I put the TS jack sockets in and screwed them tight. The last steps were to glue in the base, that I held down with these old weights. And put in the shelf in. As I mentioned before, I used a dowel that acts as a hinge and holds the shelf in place. It was a bit tricky to get everything aligned while hammering on the dowel. Last minute I decided to glue 4 pieces of leather on the edges to protect the base and stop it from moving. There you have it. I'm happy with it and looking forward to play with it for years and years to come. I will release a second video in a couple of weeks in which I will show how I install the pedals, but I am still waiting for some parts. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a comment and a like. Bye.